Mention the word San Siro to most die-hard football fans, and the image of Filippo Inzaghi getting on the end of a sweeping move, or an Adriano thunderbolt may spring to mind. But hang on a minute, those two played on different sides of the Milan divide. Correct, but the two share the famous old San Siro stadium, which is one of the reasons why the Milan derby is so special. So sit back and relax as we take you through the history of one of Europe's top fixtures. First up, let's take a look at how it all began. For a proud nation such as Italy, it might not sit too comfortably to realise that both clubs owe their establishment to a group of Englishmen. Yep, all the way back in 1899, former English footballer turned textiles worker Herbert Kilpin founded the Milan Cricket and Football Club alongside Alfred Edwards. Edwards, who was a bigwig in Milanese society at the time thanks to his high position in the British consulate, was installed as the first president of the club, and it all went swimmingly for a time during those early days. With Kilpin as manager, the team actually became the first Italian club not called Genoa to win the National League title. But as so often happens in any walk of life, with success comes growth, which ultimately means more people wanting their points to be heard. A too many cooks in the kitchen sort of scenario, if you will. During 1907 and into 1908, there had been rumblings of discontent and factions had begun to form. Some wanted Milan to stay true to their roots and only sign Italian players, whilst others wanted the club to invest in foreign talent. This ultimately led to a split, and on March 9th, 1908, Football Club Internazionale were born. The first game between the soon-to-be most hated rivals took place soon after, with AC claiming the first ever win in the prestigious fixture, running out 2-1 winners. This marked the dawn of a new era of Italian football, and the two famous old clubs have been at each other's throats ever since. So, what happened next? Well, before World War I and the years immediately after, Italian football was a little, shall we say, disorganised? The first truly national league wasn't formed until 1926 to 27, but since then, AC and Inter have played each other at least twice every season. As anyone with even a passing interest in football will know, both clubs have enjoyed sustained periods of dominance since the 1920s, with Inter claiming 34 league title wins to AC's 33. AC were arguably the team of the 50s, but Inter still enjoyed some pockets of success during this period. The 60s, 70s and 80s were at various points dominated by both, but all the while, the two had to deal with the threat of Juventus over in Turin, as well as Torino in the early days. Italian football has always been strong, so it wasn't just the two Turin teams they had to watch out for. At various points, teams such as Roma, Lazio, Fiorentina and Napoli have formed rivalries with both Milan clubs, but the most hated one is the one they have with each other. The 90s were a particularly painful time for Inter Milan, and they simultaneously had to deal with not winning the title for 17 years, whilst also watching one of the most dominant Milan sides in history destroy all comers. That iteration of Milan in the early 90s is still spoken about affectionately in football circles to this day, much to the chagrin of the men from the blue half of Milan. Let's take a look at the demographics of the fan base next. Much like any big city in the world, the citizens of Milan choose their allegiances according to family traditions. However, back in the day, sides were chosen according to your status in society. Traditionally, if you followed Internazionale, you were more likely to be from upper echelons of Milanese society, a member of the bourgeois perhaps. AC Milan, on the other hand, was seen as the club of the people and had their roots in the more blue-collar sections of the city. This is evidenced in the nicknames bestowed upon clubs in some circles. Inter can be occasionally referred to as Motoretta due to the fact that fans were wealthy enough to travel to the stadium by motorcycle or car. Some AC fans have gone a little harder on their rivals, christening them Bauscia, which translates somewhere in the neighbourhood of Braggart. AC, on the other hand, have been referred to as Tramvie by Inter fans, due to the fact that they traditionally relied on public transport to take them to games. These days, the socio-economic divides have largely dissipated, and preference for either side mainly comes from whoever your father or grandfather supported. So, what does the head-to-head record look like? As you might imagine, the Rossoneri and Nerazzurri have played each other a fair few times. So far, there have been 200 league games played between the pair, with Inter claiming the bragging rights to live up to their nickname with 76 wins. Milan are 11 behind with 65 wins, whilst there have been 59 draws. The Coppa Italia is a much closer affair, with AC just shading it with 10 wins to Inter's 9. There have also been 8 draws in the big domestic Italian Cup competition. Of course, these days though, what every big club in Europe wants is to flex on their rivals in the Champions League. Interestingly, the two Milan giants actually managed to avoid each other in Europe for the entirety of the 20th century, only coming together for the first time in the 2002 to 2003 semi-finals. Milan managed to win on away goals, despite both sharing a stadium. But Inter would get their chance of revenge just 2 seasons later, as they met again at the quarter-final stage. Unfortunately for the blue side of Milan, AC again got the job done, but Inter fans would have watched on in glee that season, as the mighty Milan of Kaká, Pirlo, Maldini and Shevchenko surrendered a 3-goal half-time lead in the final against a Steven Gerrard-inspired Liverpool. Of course, they haven't played each other since, but Inter Milan will have the chance to right those two wrongs as the two Milanese juggernauts go head-to-head in a European semi in just a matter of days. Let's just hope these games aren't abandoned like the last time they met in Europe, and Inter fans can behave themselves this time round. So, who is the more successful side? As we briefly mentioned earlier, both teams are behemoths of Italian football and are separated by just a solitary Scudetto where league titles are concerned. Inter have 34 league titles to Milan's 33, but it's safe to say that the black and red of AC have been far more successful in Europe. AC Milan have been so successful in the continent, in fact, that they actually sit second in the list of all-time winners behind Real Madrid. They still have some way to go to close the gap on Los Blancos, however, as the Spanish giants have double Milan's tally of 7, with 14 titles in club football's biggest competition. Sadly for Inter, they are quite some way away from closing the gap on their most hated rivals, and have only won the competition 3 times, and only once since the 1960s. They arguably should only have 2 as well, after one of the first pieces of officiating in the history of the game in the 1965 semi-final against Liverpool saw Inter handed 2 goals in the second leg that never should have stood. But that one's for another day. Inter have fared much better compared to their city rivals in the UEFA Cup, with 3 titles to Milan's 0. AC will point out that they have rarely been entered into that competition, however, which is the excuse used en masse by football fans across Europe when their rivals prosper in that particular competition. Where the European Super Cup is concerned, there's no question. Milan have lifted European football's seasonal curtain raiser on no fewer than 5 occasions in the past. Inter have been beaten every time they've appeared in the one-off showpiece. Let's look at some more stats now. To play in one of the most highly anticipated games of the season, not just in Italy, but in Europe on a whole, you've got to have a bit about you. So, who has made the most appearances in the Derby della Madonnina? Well, that honour belongs to Mr. Milan himself, the evergreen Paolo Maldini, who played his entire career in the black and red of AC, with 902 appearances for the club. It's hardly surprising that 56 of those appearances came against Internazionale. Yes, get to the fun stuff, I can hear you cry. Wow, okay then. You're all wondering who the highest goal scorer in the fixture is, right? Of course. Ukrainian superstar and one of the most lethal finishers of his generation, Andriy Shevchenko comes out on top of that particular list, with 14 goals in the fixture, just 1 ahead of legendary Italian Giuseppe Meazza, the man who gives his name to the official name of San Siro. Meazza actually played for both sides, which brings us nicely onto our final point. Players who've played for both sides. Surprisingly, for 2 clubs who have very little time for one another, their players have changed allegiances with surprising regularity over the years, and some of the names may actually surprise you. Infamous Italian maverick Antonio Cassano turned out for Milan before representing Inter, as well as some other legends of the game such as Edgar Davids, Patrick Vieira, and the divine ponytail himself, Roberto Baggio. Players to go in the opposite direction include the likes of the original Ronaldo, Football Manager legend Taribo West, the silky Andrea Pirlo, and one-time most expensive player in the world, Christian Vieri. Oh, and Zlatan. Sorry, Ibra. I mean, you wouldn't see this sort of thing between England's traditional Big Two, Liverpool and Manchester United. Whatever happens between 2 of European football's grandest old clubs when the pair meet in the Champions League semi, we can be sure that this fixture is one that will go on delivering for years to come. Which side of the divide do you guys sit on? And who have you got when they go to war? As usual, thanks for dropping in on us today, and remember to tune in next time for some more fun and games. Bye guys!